Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of True Crime and Wine Time. I'm JT, and here's my co-host.
I am Teri, True Crime. And guys, it's a Monday night and we're together. We have never been together on a Monday night, and I love it.
Not once.
Not once. So it is a special night all around.
It is. Tonight, we are honored to be joined by two remarkable individuals who have made significant contributions to both the legal world and the realm of storytelling. So first, we have Chief Judge Belvin Perry Jr., a name many of you might recognize as the presiding judge in one of the most infamous trials in history, the Casey Anthony case. But his distinguished career extends far beyond that high-profile trial. With decades of experience both as a prosecutor and a judge, Chief Judge Perry has been at the forefront of justice in Florida, overseeing cases that have shaped legal history. He's here to share not only his insights on some of those landmark cases, but also to discuss his career, his views on the justice system, and thoughts on the death penalty. We're also delighted to welcome Amy Mitchell, Chief Judge Perry's co-author on their compelling book, The Velvet Hammer. Together, they have crafted a deeply insightful look into the trials, both literal and personal, that have shaped his life and career. Amy is an accomplished writer, and her collaboration with Chief Judge Perry has resulted in a narrative that captures the complexities of the legal world with clarity and depth. Tonight, we are going to explore their shared journey in bringing this book to life, discuss some of the most fascinating cases from Judge Perry's illustrious career, and delve into the mind of one of the most influential figures in the legal world. So please welcome me. Please join me. Yeah, welcome me too. But please join me in welcoming Chief Judge Belvin Perry Jr. and Amy Mitchell.
Good evening.
Hello.
Everyone.
Hello.
We're so happy to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
No, we are beyond excited to have you here. And I know JT and I are both very excited. I loved the book. I thought it was amazing. And as I was telling the judge earlier, I stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning reading it. So you guys did an amazing job. It 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 grabbed your attention like immediately, and I couldn't put it down. I was like, okay, I can't stop. I gotta know more. So thank you for blessing us and coming on and talking with us.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yes, and we are glad you're both safe in Florida and that you were still able to make it. I was a little worried when I saw Milton was going to come pay a visit.
Well, Milton didn't stay too long, but he stayed long enough. We're glad Milton is gone.
Yeah. And you don't want him to come back anytime soon, right?
No, one and done is enough for him or any other hurricane. Let's keep our fingers crossed that those two depressions now won't firm into hurricanes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mother Nature.
Yeah. It's you don't.
Yeah. Needs to take a break. Needs to take a break. Well,
it's you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
That's right.
JT says that a lot to me. So I now know it also goes with hurricanes. But now I have to say, The Velvet Hammer paints a unique picture of your career. What inspired you to write the book? And how did you approach recounting such significant and often intense? I mean, this was an intense experience. So I want to know what inspired you and how did you come about recounting all of this?
Well, number one, it was never my intention to write a book. I had been asked through the years about writing a book, and I emphatically said no. Then there was a lady who cold called me at my law office, Amy Mitchell. And she asked me, would I come speak to her law class at, I believe, Lake Highland Prep. No, not Lake Highland, but Windermere Prep.
Yes.
And I accepted. I asked her what she wanted me to talk about. And she said, just talk about your career and things of that nature. After that, she said, you really need to write a book. And I said, no, I'm really not interested in writing a book. And if truth be told, she called me a couple of times after that and persuaded me that it would be a good idea to write a book. And we just talked about my life, and we talked about the cases that I had done, not all of them, but the major ones in my career. So it took us 3 years to do it, but and Amy had the idea of weaving my life into the cases and how my life story affected how I acted during those cases and what I did.
Wow. I personally think that was brilliant, Amy. And I know I read that you wanted to write books and you were an author, I believe, already to some extent. What intrigued you about Judge Perry to want to write his story?
So you are correct. I don't know. It's something innate in me. As a little girl, I just read books all the time, and I'd write stories since I was 5 years old. And I've been trying to get a book published even that young. I would, try to submit it. Not at 5, but when I was in elementary school, high school, even law school, I was writing books. And I used to watch the Casey Anthony trial before I started practicing law. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was pregnant with my second child. And I was very fascinated with that case, especially because I was a mother too. And there was something about Judge Perry. I would tune in every single day of that trial just to watch him because I found it fascinating. I always wanted to be a judge as well. So I just found him fascinating. I thought he was really amazing in the courtroom. He was no nonsense. He commanded respect. He had a sense of humor. But, people really respected him. And I just said to myself every day, I'm going to write his book. He doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to write his book. I don't know how, I don't know when, but it's going to happen. And so that's when I opened the law department 5 years after the trial. And I decided I would just look him up because I was always curious, what's the judge up to? And he was actually working at a private law firm and a personal injury law firm. And like he said, I cold called him, and he came and he lectured. And what he didn't mention is that these high school students were at the edge of their seats for the whole hour and a half that he lectured. His cases were so fascinating. And I said to him, you need to have a book. Can I write it?
That says a lot. If you can get that age group on the edge of their seats, that says a lot.
Yes. Yeah. In a world of TikTok and 30-second videos, holding somebody's attention for 5 minutes alone is real difficult these days. So that's just awesome.
Yeah. Now you talk about the Casey Anthony trial. Now I've got to know, how did you manage the intense media scrutiny during that case? Because in my mind, that is the case that blew up to some degree watching trials in my mind, or it did for me.
Well, number one, there was no privacy. I attempted to carry on a normal life. I would go to Publix, to the grocery store, and I had to stop going to Publix because people would stop me. And of course, I couldn't say anything but listen and move on, or say, I can't talk with you about it. If I would go into a department store, I found out that people were videoing me, and that they would end up posting it on their Facebook pages. And, my adult daughter would call me and say, Dad, were you And I said, yes, I just stopped by there to pick up something. Well, you're
Uh-oh, I think we
might have briefly lost
might have
Judge Perry.
That's because he had no privacy. The internet decided to give him a
Right.
few seconds of privacy since he didn't have it.
Well,
While we're
it's
waiting for him to come back, but I can't imagine just going to the grocery store.
I know.
It was a very
Amy.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
No,
go ahead.
no,
Amy.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it was a very, very famous case. I mean, millions of people, and even now, Casey Anthony moved to Tennessee, Nashville, and she's apparently having this affair with a man who's been married for 20 years, and it's blowing up everywhere. So it's just a very popular case.
okay. I'm back.
Yeah, we decided
He's
the
back.
internet decided to give you some privacy since you didn't have it before. It wanted to just let you know you could still have it just by freezing for a minute.
You know, I would go into restaurants a few times, and I would be looking at a menu, and next thing I notice, everybody's standing taking pictures or videos of me. So my life was very sheltered. I remember traveling to go visit someone in Alabama, and I had my grandson with me, and we were driving, and we stopped at a service station in Georgia, and people approached me there. So airport. So my life was not my life, and still now today, people remember me and ask me questions about Casey Anthony. So you just learn to live.
Was that the primary? Oh, sorry. Was that the primary cause for like the trepidation in writing a book, not to rehash or drum up that kind of attention again?
No, that wasn't the trepidation. To be honest with you, I didn't think anybody would find my life interesting.
I beg to differ.
I'm like, I beg to differ, sir.
and that was the main reason. And I'm quite busy. I heavily involved in my community. I sit on a number of boards. So I just did not want to take the time, to be honest with you, to do it.
Now, with the loss of the privacy, did you have people angry or anyone showing up at your house or anyone acting a fool? Or were they just coming up to you and trying to ask questions?
Well, of course, I had a couple of death threats during the trial. There were a couple of times that I had chase cars, i.e. police officers, trail me to the courthouse. And there was one time where I had 24-hour protection, outside my house for, that comes with the territory. In other cases, I've had a RICO case that I did where one of the defendants attempted to hire a hitman to kill me. And matter of fact, 2 weekends ago, I ran into one of the police officers that was on the detail that guarded my house for a week.
Wow. And I guess us people in the general public, we don't think about that. I mean, I had an uncle who was a judge, but he was just a little local justice of the peace, So I always assume everybody went about their life. But when you handle a case like that, your whole world changed. Did it affect your family? And did they have to be careful when they went out in public?
Yes, they did. I mean, it got to the point where the captain that was over security at the courthouse arranged for me to have a canine, German Shepherd, highly trained. A local police department in another county was disbanding their canine unit. And we got this 95-pound German Shepherd that became a part of our family. You know, everyone in my household learned how to use a firearm. So, you know, you learn to adapt to your environment. You learn to deal with the stressors. Plus, you know, I was raised in a police officer's home.
I was getting ready to say, because
Yeah.
in the book you talk about your dad was one of the first African American police officers in Orlando, I believe it was.
Yes.
And that for him had to be life-changing, but you watching that and being in that household. So you definitely were aware, of the legal system and law enforcement.
Exactly. Go back to 1951, in the heart of the Deep South,
Yeah.
where segregation was still king. When my dad and Richard Arthur Jones, when they were first hired, they only could patrol the black areas, and they walked the beat. When they first went on, they didn't have guns. They had a nightstick, handcuffs, and a thing called a slapjack. And if they had to arrest someone, they had to walk them at least a couple of blocks, handcuff them to a telegraph pole, a telephone line pole, and wait for the paddy wagon to come pick them up. As my dad once said, that first year was kind of different because the criminals had guns and weapons, and they did.
Yeah. They didn't have all the necessary tools, in my opinion, that they needed to be successful. But they were successful in spite of that, it sounds like.
They were successful, and let's just face reality. That was a different time. That was a time where it was white and colored bathrooms, water fountains, schools were segregated, neighborhoods were segregated, and there were communities that you knew not to go into, and that was your world.
Right.
There was you couldn't go into certain department stores, and you darn sure couldn't go into a restaurant. If you wanted to, the few restaurants that would serve you, you had to go to the back door, out by the trash containers, and place your order.
Yeah. Definitely
was a
different
different world.
times. Now,
No.
oh, I'm sorry, JT. I was going to ask him, because you were an attorney, then a judge. Which role did you find more challenging? Or were they each challenging in their own way?
They were very challenging. They were equally different. When I became a prosecutor in Robert Egan's office, there had only been one black prosecutor before me, and he had gone, and he became a judge. So when I went into that office, I was the only black attorney in the entire office. And I will never forget my first trial. I went up to a witness, elderly, well, not elderly, but she was in her 50s or 60s, African-American lady who was a witness. And I asked, I introduced myself, and she said, don't play with me. I don't have time to play. There are no black prosecutors. I had to go get the bailiff to come in and assure her that I was in fact the prosecutor. So
Oh my
that's how my
gosh.
first case started out. They just didn't believe it. They were shocked. And yes, there are the pressures there. You can't have a bad day. You have to, you can't be average. You have to be a superstar. And the same scrutiny followed me to the bench.
That
But, I was
so
well
that's
prepared by my parents.
oh yeah, no, absolutely. I just want to shift quickly over to Amy. Amy, it is evident that Judge Perry has a ton of just amazing stories and moments. Were there any that stood out to you personally as especially powerful or moving? And how did you approach kind of working out those sections?
It's a very good question. So, in the beginning stages of the book, Judge Perry would come to the country club that in the community I live in. He'd meet me about once a month for about an hour and a half at a time. And one of those times we sat down at the table in the veranda of the clubhouse, and he was telling his story about this hot dog he saw when he was growing up. There was this hot dog counter, the lunch counter at
Oh yeah.
Woolworths.
Oh, Woolworth.
And he was explaining how, during segregation, he was not allowed to eat at the lunch counter. And he said he was a fourth grade boy, I believe it was fourth grade, and he'd stare into the window and watch those hot dogs rolling on this, on the grill, and he'd want that hot dog so badly. And finally, he was able to have that hot dog some years later. And the way he just told that story, because we were in person with each other, I just really felt it. And his description and what it was like for him to take that first bite of really freedom and all the thoughts that went into his mind. And he said, for a moment, just for a moment, that hot dog tasted bittersweet. And because he thought about all the sacrifices everybody had to make. I don't know. It was so powerful to me. I wrote that section of the chapter fluidly. Like, it just came to me very easily. I mean, obviously you have to have the sense and, the details, but that was a little bit challenging. But other than that, I mean, I just thought that was it was great the way he told it and what that hot dog meant. So
Yeah, reading that was really moving. I mean, it was a really good way to kind of hook into the book, really. I mean,
Mhm.
that story is incredible. Now, Judge, that obviously kind of hits on your early life. How would you say that your early life influenced the way you connect with, give back to your community, both as a judge, a public figure, but also a member of the community?
Well, it starts with my mom and dad. My parents always believed in giving back. Throughout my formative years in elementary school, I always remembered my dad would help elderly people. He would take them to their medical appointments. He would go grocery shopping for them. And he would take me along with him sometime. And my dad made a promise to a veteran that he knew who had no family. And my dad had promised him that when he passed, that he would, have a funeral for him and not just have him buried by the state. And I can remember all of my siblings, my mom. We missed school that day, and we went to Mr. John's funeral and went to the cemetery. And even went to the viewing. And I was blessed to attend a church called Shiloh Baptist Church. And that church was a church where our motto was, where everybody is somebody. And it had most of the prominent African Americans that attended that church. One was Attorney Paul C. Perkins, who assisted Thurgood Marshall in the Groveland murder cases. One was Willie James Bruton, who was a local funeral director. He was the superintendent of the Sunday school at one point. So was Mr. Perkins. And they were my Sunday school teachers. And then there was Arthur Pappy Kennedy, who became the first Black city commissioner. And every time the church was open, we were there. Sundays, Saturdays, and during the week. And my dad always said, you take the tools that you have, but you have to give back. And he stressed that to each and every one of my siblings. So despite the fact that I grew up in segregation, my father and mom would never let us dwell upon that. And my dad told me one time when I asked him, when I first heard, someone get called the N-word, my dad had me sit down and he said, you never let anybody define you. You define yourself. And you tune out the noise and you go about working with the tools that you have. And he always stressed, don't feel sorry for yourself. If there's a door that's shut, find another door to go through. And despite all the obstacles, you will persevere. And he always stressed the value of an education. That people can take a lot of things away from you, but they can't take your dignity, and they can't take the great matter away from you that's in your head. So that's the way I was raised. That's the way each of my siblings were raised.
My goodness. That's a great lesson. Everybody write it down in your notebooks. Or you can check back later.
That is a great lesson. And I think, those of us who were kind of raised the same way, I always say it's Southern, way we were raised. My grandmother was the same way. No one could define who you are and no one can take away you. So yeah, that's amazing.
Now, looking back, there's kind of hopping into kind of on the judge side of things. How do you feel that the legal system's evolved since you started your career?
Well, the legal system has changed a great deal, but it still has a long way to go. When I started out, there were about 3 Black judges. When I left, we had 65 judges, and only 5 of the 65 were African American. One of the things I learned is, in order for a system to be fair, you got to have participation. Everybody can't be a public defender. You need people of all races and genders to be judges. In my circuit now, the vast majority of the judges now are female. So the system has evolved. It has a long way to go. But when you look at it, it's the best system in the world. There's always room for improvement. You got pockets all over the United States where sometimes justice may not be fair. But that's where the media and the press plays a role. That's where the fourth estate comes in, and they have a duty to expose those places. It's kind of strange. You don't see people mug people in the middle of Yankee Stadium at the second base plate, and the stadium is full of people. It just doesn't happen. That's where that media, that fourth estate with the searching eye, in my opinion, have the duty to expose those pockets of injustice. Justice is something that if it does not have the appearance of justice, then people are not going to accept it. And you got to make sure that there are people of all races and creeds that participate in the system. And that keeps things balanced. People don't say some of the things they probably would have said if I was not at the table. And people tend to look at things differently. But you got to take part in the system, and you got to have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Agree, 100%. Now, I'm going to jump in, JT, because I have to ask, because the thing I found interesting in your book, well, I found many things interesting, but one, you didn't know whether or not you wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. And you have my heart because you didn't like chemistry. I don't like chemistry, and JT and I don't math. So
Me too.
see, I mean, we just don't, math is not our thing.
I
But
write.
wonder,
That's what I do.
we write. We don't do math. Have you ever wished that you maybe would have become a doctor instead of an attorney and a judge?
No.
Okay.
There were two things I really enjoyed as a kid. I remember I got a microscope when I was in the third grade. And one of the science projects that we did was to take cut grass, put it in a mason jar with water, and eventually, after a couple of weeks, a one-cell amoeba. And you got a eyedropper, dropped it on a slide, and you could see that one-cell amoeba. So I had always started with that. I had a keen interest in science. My dad had two wishes. He wanted two sons, which he had. He wanted one son to be a doctor and one to be a lawyer. And when I was in 12th grade, and I was vacillating between the two, organic chemistry let me know that the better part of valor was to stick with the law.
It has a way of doing that.
Yes.
But if I remember correctly, your brother became a doctor. So your dad got his wish.
He got his wish. My dad, we had my baby brother is an orthopedic surgeon. My baby sister is a lawyer. She's now retired. I have a sister who was a principal of a high school. She's retired. And I have another sister that, was a small business owner, and she's retired. So he got his wish.
But the interesting thing about you telling about everyone's career, everyone took a path that impacts and helps others. I don't know if I'm the only one that caught that, but school teacher, sir, I mean, each one does something for someone else.
It's interesting. My sister was the principal of my alma mater in high school, Jones High School. Took a school that was a D school and took it to 3 points short of an A school.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
It is huge. And I mentor at that school through an organization called 100 Black Men of Orlando, which is a part of 100 Black Men of America. And we've raised over the last 15 years close to $3 million for scholarships. We have about 22 students in our program that are in college now. And they get $5,000 annually from our scholarship fund. And we have about 17 that are in high school now. We're going to have 11 graduates this year. And the following year, 8 graduates. So I spent a lot of time with that.
Well, I now know why Amy is probably thinking, I did a good thing by cold calling him and asking him to come lecture to these students, because he already, had an impact and a passion with students, right?
What's interesting, because that's exactly what I thought. I thought he inspired me so much. Imagine what he could do for these high school students who obviously had an interest in the law because they were taking my class, and other students showed up too outside of the class. But yeah, I just thought he knows how to inspire people with his words and his stories. They're fascinating.
And I have to ask, because I'm a very sappy person, I want to know, when you were hearing these stories from him, how often did you have to hold back those moments of tears or just the goosebumps about, I mean, his parents did a great job raising the kids to all, give back.
Yeah, the goosebumps definitely, especially with the murder cases, the Black Widow in particular. When he spoke of her, it was terrifying, really. I said, oh my gosh, how am I going to write about this woman who was a serial killer and poisoned her husbands and boyfriends and son? But yeah, all of it was just very fascinating. I think when I felt the most emotion, though, was when I actually wrote the stories, when I was writing his childhood, how he went out into the field when Aunt Lucille told him to get 3 switches, when he had to get punished, and the psychological effect it had walking those 30 feet to the hedges and walking back. Like, writing about it, when you're actually writing about it and hearing about it, it all just comes together like a life of its own. So yeah, each chapter of that book, I can honestly say, stands alone as a story on its own. I believe we didn't do that on purpose, but it just so happens that each chapter is like a short story that comes together as a memoir, true crime memoir. So
Agree. And I will say, as a child who had to go and pick my own switches when I did something naughty, I mean, you talk about flashback. It's like, okay, I remember walking out the front door, walking to the hedge. You didn't want one that was too thin, because then that would really hurt, but you didn't want too thick. I mean, it's like brings you back to that. And that's one thing I love about people who are such great storytellers.
it's almost the exact similar experience Judge Perry had that you had.
I was raised in the South, and that just seemed to be the thing to do. You went and picked your own switch.
Yep.
Judge, I saw you lean back and start chuckling when Amy was talking about that story.
It leaves an impression on you. Sometimes when they find out they cannot appeal to your intellect, they'll appeal to a more tender spot of your body to
Mhm.
get the message across.
But was the message well received? I can say in my case, it was well received, and I learned my lesson very quickly.
Mine was well received also. I didn't do the same thing twice, put it that way, particularly with my dad.
Yeah. Now, you talk about the Black Widow. I'm going to just say that case haunts me, but fascinates me at the same time. Um, and I know it's a very notorious case in Florida. I want to know from you, Judge, what aspects of that case stands out most to you with legal challenges, but also the human impact? Because that case was insane.
You know, I will never forget. I was in the state attorney's office. I was head of the criminal intake division, where I also tried the major homicide cases. And one of my crack investigators came to me and said that he had received a call from Ted Geronimo, who was an investigator with the Pensacola Police Department. He laid out one about the attempted murder of John Gentry, not once but twice. The fact that they had uncovered the death of Bobby Joe Morris, which was in Trinidad, Colorado. And he suggested that we may want to look into Sergeant James Goodyear's case. So I gave Dusty the green light. We contacted, and he found that they had paraffin blocks of Sergeant Goodyear's tissues up in Washington, D.C. He sent those off. It took a couple of months to get the lab results back. And it indicated that those tissues contain arsenic, but it was not enough to base the case on. So I filed a petition for exhumation, and we had to exhume the body of Sergeant Goodyear. He had been in the ground for a little bit more than 10 years. And that was a very unpleasant but necessary thing to do. And we did that. We got the results back from doing analysis of his organs, hair, nails, etc. That he died as a result of arsenic poisoning. And then witnesses were scattered all over the United States, and we had to run those down. And as you peel back that onion and you receive information on what she did to her fiance, John Gentry, in Pensacola, what she did to her son, and those trials were going on then, and the exhumation of Bobby Joe Morris, who died in Trinidad, but he was buried in Brewton, Alabama. You began to see the personification of evil. And the thing that I learned, which I did not know, was watching someone die of arsenic poisoning. It is a very unpleasant experience. And Miss Beverly, one of the witnesses, said, you know, Judy told her that you got to have a very strong stomach to watch someone slowly die. They hallucinate. They vomit endlessly. They cry out in pain, and their organs began to shut down. And then when I learned more about, she tried to kill her own son by arsenic, but only gave him enough to basically kill his central nervous system. And then, like the dutiful mother, she went down and got him out of the VA hospital, St. Petersburg, took him back to Pensacola. And what does she do? She takes him fishing in a canoe with 18 pounds of braces, with no life jacket. And mysteriously, the canoe tips over. He sinks like a rock. For someone that can watch her husband die. And remember this, and one of the things that let me know how cold and calculated she was. While her husband was away, she started dealing with a gentleman who was in the auto business and would come to Orlando sometime to auction, and they became lovers. She invited that man to her husband's funeral. And, you know, that night after she had buried him, before the soil had really settled in his grave, she left and spent the night with that gentleman. And you ask yourself, what type of human being would do something like that? You know, what type of human being would just prey on men, even her own son?
Yeah.
And that's why the name the Black Widow stuck to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to be in her presence when she was transported here, and we transported her to the Orange County Jail and booked her in. All I can remember was she was in the back seat, handcuffed, with one of the secretaries in my office. Myself and my investigator were in the front seat. And even though we had the air conditioner on, because it was, I think it was August.
It was warm.
But once she got in that car, there was a coldness about her that just brought a very uneasy feeling to me. I mean, a chill to me. I've never had that feeling before nor after that. And just to live through that and see and put all those cases, separate deaths together, and present them in court. And, you know, those were what was known as Williams rule evidence, or similar fact evidence as it is called today. And you have to be very careful about that. You can't make it a feature, but it goes to the planning and to the motive behind it and the similarities. So she was the most diabolical individual who only cared about herself and did not value life at all. You know, she treated those people who she claimed she loved just like insects when she basically went to the local grocery store and pointed out to Mary Beverly You can buy it's here. This is the poison and give it to him. Stuff
Yeah.
that you use to kill rats and other parasites. And she treated men like parasites.
Yeah. Now, if I think I'm correct here, you actually attended the execution of her, correct?
Yes, I did.
How did that affect your thoughts or feelings about the death penalty? Did it deter it? Did it change you in any way from making that decision?
You know, I had asked for the death penalty as a prosecutor. And as a judge, I think I had sentenced someone to death by that time. And I had taken law students and clerks to visit death row. I even sat in old Sparky in that chair. You know, I walked down death row and saw some of the people that I put on death row. They were surprised to see me. And I had heard about, you know, defense lawyers talking about how awful it was. And that particular case, we did the investigation. I was involved in it from beginning to end. You know, we didn't get a package that was gift wrapped by a law enforcement agency. Myself and my investigator, we did the whole thing from soup to nuts. And it was something that we wanted to finish. If anybody deserved to die in Florida's electric chair at the time, it was her. And I was less than 3 feet away from her. I was on the front row with Mr. Goodyear's brother-in-law and with my investigator. I was sitting in the middle. And it was very regimented. And it was something that was a lot less cruel and instantaneous than what she had done and other murderers had done to their victims.
Yeah, because poisoning, like you said, poisoning people is not an easy way to go.
No, I mean, you know, if you've been around a person that is vomiting, that's not a pleasant thing to watch. But to constantly watch someone do that, and you're feeding them and telling them to eat more.
Yeah.
And then you watch them hallucinate. I mean, he was seeing things, attempting to grab imaginary rabbits. And you're suffering that way. You're trying to get better. And like she told John Gentry when she was giving him paraformaldehyde and vitamin C capsules when he was first started taking them and it's making him sick, her solution was double the dose.
I mean, it says a lot about a person who could watch it after they did it to them. I mean, that, like you said, diabolical. I'm not even sure if that's a strong enough word in my word selection because I I can't even watch an animal suffer, much less a human suffer and do it to them.
Judy Buenoano was the personification of evil. And she was just evil. I know of no other way to describe her.
Yeah.
And there was one more case that just couldn't prove it, but there was one more guy that she was involved in that died under mysterious circumstances.
I guess we shouldn't say that that means she probably did it because there needs to be evidence, right? But probably did.
Well, the case was a strong circumstantial case. She made a statement to Mary Beverly that she killed her husband. She even mentioned to Bobby Joe Morris's mom that she also killed her husband. And when you take in consideration the fact that she tried to she poisoned her husband, she poisoned Bobby Joe Morris, she poisoned her son.
What was her reasoning? Was it for life insurance?
It was for
What was her
life
motive?
insurance. It was, she took out life insurance.
Okay,
On
that's
the
what I thought
rest
I
of them.
remembered.
She had the GI insurance on her husband, but she got smarter and took out more life insurance on the rest. But when you go back and you look at her background, she basically was abused as a child. So she had some of that scar tissue there. But I don't care how abused you are. To kill your own son, your own flesh and blood,
Mm-hmm.
because he was a little different.
Yeah.
What type of human being is that?
Yeah. Not human to some degree in my book. I'm sure JT agrees. Because there's a lot of people who are abused and they do not grow up to kill people. They don't. Well, talking about moms who do that, I guess that leads us into, I think the headline is the most hated woman in America or the most hated mom in America, Miss Casey Anthony. The biggest question I have about that case was, how did you pick a jury, or what were the difficulties with picking a jury when everybody across the country knew of this case? I just am like, how?
Well, it was not easy, number one. It was a very difficult process. It took us 11 days to select a jury. The key is not whether or not they had not heard about the case. The question was whether or not you had formed any opinions concerning her guilt or innocence. And if you formed the opinion that she may be guilty, could you set aside that opinion and decide the case only upon the evidence that will be presented in the courtroom as applied to the law? Some people can do that. Some people couldn't do it. It was surprising that there were a couple of jurors, I think one or two, that hadn't heard about the case because they didn't read newspapers nor watch TV.
Oh.
But once they answered a magic question that they could set it aside, and it's not a weak, I think I can, maybe I can, but firmly said that, we were able to get 12 plus 5 alternates. I was concerned about not having more than 5 alternates. because all the research I had done at that time indicated that in major cases like that, you lost a juror every week.
Yeah.
We lost no jurors during that case. None. Zero.
What do you think? Why do you think that is?
Well, number one, we did our research and we looked at the reasons why people lost jurors. Jurors, when they're sequestered, basically are treated more like prisoners than anything else. So number one, it started with their accommodations. We got them at the Rosen Shingle Creek Resort.
Oh.
Okay. Harris Rosen, who's a great community partner, gave us the government rate.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The second factor was that back during then, there were certain TV stations that did not carry the news. So we reprogrammed all of their televisions only to get those channels. But we had to we had to monitor those. The second thing was that we had a suite which we used as a evening or day room where they could come in under supervision of court deputies and access their emails and use their telephones. Another thing that we did was we had about 75 DVD movies and a list of books that we made available. The hotel closed down the exercise. They cut the television off and only allowed access to jurors between 5 and 7 a.m. The hotel had 3 swimming pools. They shut down one swimming pool during select hours so they could swim. We also made arrangements to take them to various different restaurants, private rooms to eat at night. We even took them to Arabian Nights in a booth where they could watch the Knights joust and put on a show. They were all from the Tampa Bay area. Bright House, which is now known as Spectrum, we had them out at their corporate headquarters in a special room where they could watch the hockey game, and we fed them. We took them out to watch fireworks one night. And then the most unique thing was I made the decision to work a half a day on Saturday. I was always taught by my parents that idle time is the devil's workshop. So they worked a half a day. We started at 9, ended at 1. But we also had time for them to have visitors on Saturday evening. And the visitors could go back to their rooms with them.
Oh.
The visitors were screened. They had to sign forms agreeing not to discuss the case with them or any questions. And a number of them took advantage of that. The visitors had to be out by midnight. So most of them had visitors starting between 3 and 5, and they would stay until midnight. We had what was known as a Publix run, where people from court administration, they would get their grocery lists and whatever they wanted to have, drinks or whatever. and they would go shop for them and have it back in their rooms. We took care of their religious needs on their particular day of worship. We also had appointments for them, for the ladies to get their hair done and men to get haircuts.
Wow.
And every afternoon during our afternoon recess, there was a lady called a dessert lady who would bring fabulous different desserts for them.
Sign me up for that one.
I stocked their jury room out of my own pocket with coffee, soft drinks, and snacks. While sometimes we would order their lunch in to break it up a couple of times for lunch, they were taken to various places for lunch outside of the courthouse. So those were the things that made it easy for them not to get stir crazy and feel like they were prisoners.
I'm like, you thought outside of the box. And I've often heard, I know someone who just sat on a jury in New York, and he was like, I am so glad that they didn't sequester us because I can't imagine being locked in Motel 6 and eating McDonald's every day for 2 weeks. He goes, I can't do it. And you just knocked it way out of the park by treating them. You basically showed them that you were grateful for the service that they were doing, because what they had to do was not easy.
No, it wasn't. It was a great deal of planning, every detail. We had the maid staff sign non-disclosure agreements. The deputies collected their trash out of their rooms, and they were secretly disposed of whatever was in there.
I'm speechless. And that doesn't happen often, JT will tell you, and most people will tell you. That doesn't happen. The fact that a judge thought so intricately about the people, because I'm in HR by day and my tagline is it's all about the people. You just took that way above any bar I've ever set, because you took care. I mean, hair, you got their hair done, their haircut. Amy, you probably feel me. I mean, can you imagine? How are you going to get your hair cut, your hair done? You can't go anywhere. You can't see your kids.
No, I would not want to have been one of those jurors, but I would tell you this, that if I had to be a jury or a juror on any case, the Casey Anthony case would certainly have been one of the most fascinating ones to probably sit on.
Yeah. I mean, I also, in my mind, it had to help with the mental struggles they had from hearing the case every day. Just watching the case took, an emotional toll on me. So I can imagine sitting there in person.
We even had one juror that had some dental issues. And I had prearranged to have doctors on standby from various specialties. So this juror, when we recessed for lunch at noon, was taken by 2 deputies to this dental office where they were waiting for her. And they took care of her dental needs, not once, but twice. She was back by the time we restarted court. And guess what? The dentist did not charge.
Oh.
Wow.
See, there are good medical professionals out there that do not charge.
No, and we had a couple of private clubs that opened their private dining rooms up with member only type clubs. to feed them. One was in the middle of downtown Orlando, the Citrus Club. And another one was the University Club. It was a community effort that people pitched in, and we tried to make them as comfortable as possible and saw to all of their needs.
I mean,
That's amazing.
yeah.
And I, you know, it's so important because that case truly drew national, international attention. In terms of looking back, what do you think were some of the more pivotal points in the trial that influenced the jury's decision ultimately?
Well, there were a number of things. And let me start off with this. You have a car, and it's a used car. And each one of those cars have the same blemish to it. Same little nicks, same little dents. And you have two people that are trying to sell you this car with the blemishes, the nicks, and the dents. Who are you going to buy the car from? Is it going to be from someone that you kind of like the most, or is it going to be from someone who appears rough around the edges, someone who's edgy, someone who can appear to be mean and nasty? Jose Baez, while at the time he was not a student of the Code of Evidence, prepared a great case, but he did something that most great football coaches do. He made adjustments in that trial. When you get 12 people in that box, you have to be able to pivot and present a case that will appeal to them. Mm-hmm. Some people like sweet tea. Some people don't like sweet tea. Some people like strawberries. Some people don't like strawberries. Baez was able to do that. And while the state had a very strong and propelling case, he threw that thing around called reasonable doubt. Another major thing to me, there is the Simons case that's going to be tried this week in Georgia. And the case has several parallels with the Anthony case, young mother, both toddlers.
Yes.
But if you look at that indictment versus the Anthony indictment, they basically put, it's unknown how the child died. Mm-hmm. One of the major things I think was, I'm charged with the responsibility in any case of giving the standard jury instructions. If you want special instructions dealing with particular issues in your case, that's incumbent upon the parties to draft and present. My background as a prosecutor and looking at this case, I just knew that the state would request a special jury instruction that they did not have to prove how she died. It was not an element of the crime.
Right.
They did not. Matter of fact, to save time, because I know lawyers can't agree on anything, I had gone in, did the research, and I had drafted a special jury instruction. They didn't ask for it. Another thing, I think the state was very overconfident because they had a strong case. Mm-hmm. But they did not argue during closing argument if you don't believe that we proved the crime of murder in the first degree, this is why we have proved second degree murder and aggravated manslaughter. They didn't do that. And the reason I bring that up was there was one juror who only spoke, that the reason she did not find Casey Anthony guilty was because the state could not prove how she died.
Were you shocked that they didn't? Were you shocked that they didn't put in those special instructions?
I was surprised at the time, yes. I mean, I took time crafting the instruction.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I didn't want to lose time with them arguing about an instruction. This is the instruction I've drafted. It accurately reflects the law. And I cited the case law in there and, as a basis. So I was prepared to give it. It wasn't my role to insert myself in the case. Jose Baez was a gentleman throughout the trial. He always greeted the jurors with a smile. On the other hand, you had one of the prosecutors, Jeff Ashton, who was one of my former colleagues at the state attorney's office. And Jeff is a hell of a lawyer. But sometimes Jeff's personality, when he would object with anger, like a rocket going off. You shooting a cannon off. And I don't think that worked well with this jury.
Yeah. He didn't play well to them, did he?
No, he didn't. And, Baez did. And you can say what you want to say. But when you look across, which the jurors did, and they were looking directly at Casey Anthony, she looked quite innocent, youthful. And you can say what you want to say, but people will sometimes say, she doesn't. They threw enough smoke, mirrors, to create this thing of reasonable doubt. And, one of the other things I think they did not do, they put the records in about George being at work, but they didn't have anybody come in and explain it to verify that he was in fact at work and that it was impossible for George to come back home, fish her out of the pool and then dump her like trash.
Yeah.
And one of the things that caused George's credibility problem is the young lady came in and testified that she had an affair with George, that he made certain statements that one could interpret that he had unclean hands.
Right.
And they weren't able to counter that. So once you start adding up factor after factor, it gave them a chance. And I've learned through my many years that anything is possible. The type of cases when I was a prosecutor that scared me to death was the one where I had them on all fours. And I knew that it was no way. But there are factors, and I'm going to tell you what made me think about that. I tried a robbery case. They were caught red-handed. The proceeds from the robbery was caught in the car. The store clerk and two witnesses identified the person. And they were out for 6 hours because of one juror. And this one juror was getting on the elevator. And one of the lawyers got on the elevator with her, and she said, "I'm glad somebody's on here. I've been trying to go up to the 4th floor for the last 10 minutes, and the elevator won't go up there." Well, guess what? She was in the basement of the courthouse and kept pressing the button for ground so it wouldn't go anywhere. And he said he knew he had to have her on his jury. So I learned many years ago, jurors, most of the time, not all of the time, but the majority of the time, see things very differently from what lawyers and judges do.
Yeah, they have a
Absolutely.
different.
And go ahead, Teri.
I was going to say they just have a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously Casey Anthony is just one of the many high profile cases that you've presided over. Just kind of turning focus briefly to Amy. Amy, how did you decide which cases to kind of focus on in the book?
Well, we knew Casey Anthony was definitely going to be one. That was no brainer. The Black Widow was definitely going to be the other one because Judge Perry did something very interesting in that he compared the Black Widow to Casey Anthony and why
Saw that, yeah.
why Black Widow was a clear death penalty case and Casey was not, because the two are very similar in how they liked the limelight. They were charming. They used men, even though Casey wasn't to the extent of the Black Widow. So it obviously was a very horrifying story that had, the trauma effect. And so those two were a definite. And then, I had seen, I didn't know what other cases to really put in there. But I had watched Judge Perry on an interview while I was doing some research into what cases should we use. And he had spoken about Kirk Hansbrough, who robbed an insurance company and stabbed the manager there to death and stomped her on the chest. He had talked about that case, and he had talked about Jerry Correll with the interviewer. And Jerry Correll was the murderer who slayed his ex-wife, his ex-mother-in-law, his 5-year-old daughter, all in their Orlando home, and then waited for the ex-sister-in-law to come home. And then he killed her. It was a stabbing spree. So I looked up those two cases and I thought, this is very interesting. I think we should use these because these were his prosecutor days. And then get into his death penalty cases after doing those cases, as well as another one, Joseph Allen Martyr, who abducted a young woman on the side of the street and then took her to a field and raped and battered and stabbed her. So, and then with his death penalty cases, Judge Perry was very easy. He said, I could, we can choose whichever one we wanted to, whichever one we thought would work. So I just researched them. They were all fascinating. I really didn't know which one to pick, but I just picked the ones that resonated. I wanted to put domestic violence in there because it's a real thing. So I like the Dusty Spencer case for that reason. I talked about narcissists, the difference between narcissism, sociopath, and psychopaths. And those are terms that are very loosely used nowadays and very common. And a lot of people don't know what it means and what gaslighting means and all these different terms. So I thought that the Dusty Spencer, where he murdered his wife, encompassed a lot of those aspects. And yeah, there's plenty of other murder cases I could write about with Judge Perry.
For better or worse, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, Teri, you're muted. However, what you had to say, I'm sure, was...
I am. I was going to say, I have to ask, because even as just a person who covers true crime and spends a lot of time in that realm, how did you protect your mental health when seeing this and hearing and seeing the actual evidence daily for so many years?
One of the things I learned from my dad, and which was reemphasized by my mom, was to be able to compartmentalize these things. While I worked a great deal, and I had a home office all those years, I never discussed my cases or my work with my family. My dad never talked with me about his experiences with the police department until I had completed law school. And, you know, the hell that he went through is that they went through as the first Black police officers. And I asked him why. And he told me then that if I would have told you those things back then, you would have probably become bitter. You would have had a chip on your shoulder, and it would have not served you well. While you knew that there were good people and bad people, you grew up in segregation and all those things. My dad felt that bitterness had no place, that bitterness could sometimes be used as a crutch not to succeed. So, you know, I separated those things. And when I closed whatever work I had at home, I didn't discuss it. Because if you constantly breathe that 24/7 and it becomes a part of your life, it will control you. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to have anything that controlled me. Did I have up and down moments of some of the things that I saw? Yes. Did I dwell on it? No. You know, life is too short to let anything cause you to hate, to have ill will. My daddy would often tell me he does not know anybody on the face of this earth that he would hate so much that he would be willing to go to hell for. And that always resonated with me. And while there may be people on this earth that I don't care for, I'm not going to let my hatred for them consume me, because then you give them control over you. And when people can control you, even indirectly, that gives them too much power over you. So that's why I separated everything. And, you know, I learned when a task was completed, it was completed.
I'm going to just say that's some helpful information, JT, for us that live
Yeah.
in this world, that we might do a little better at compartmentalizing this, because I know we do live in it a lot of times, many hours of the day, but I think that's some good advice for us. Now, you did a case, and I do not know how to say his last name, but it's Thomas Gudinas, I think.
Thomas Lee Cadenas, the downtown murderer.
It was horrific and awful. I mean, how did you manage that? Because just reading about it, I found myself with a lot of feelings around it.
Well, while Cadenas was a horrific murder where he stabbed and raped this young lady after she had died and took a survey stake and impaled it in her body between her private parts. Nothing can compare with Jerry Correll in that crime scene. We kept that crime scene for close to 2 months. Myself and my co-prosecutor, Ray Sharp, every afternoon at 3 o'clock, we would go to that house. We got on our hands and knees and went over every inch of that house. We had them go in and take out the drains and the sinks. Found blood. Even though we didn't have DNA, we were able to type it to Jerry Correll. We even had them take out the tub in the washing machine. Found traces of blood where he went in and tried to wash his clothes.
Oh, wow.
Blood had sort of disappeared in the walls, and we asked Mr. Fisher, we used to call him Doc Fisher. He created a substance that would take blood that he had wiped off the walls, attempted to wipe off, that was invisible, and made it visible using a substance called luminol. Every inch of that house we went over. Took apart baseboards, found specks of dried blood back there. That entire house was like a bloodbath. You know, when you have someone that stabs their own daughter in excess of 20 times, stabs his wife, ex-wife rather, in excess of 21 times, and then at the end, while she is dead, and he had took a stab from her chest all the way down to her stomach, and then he took a pillow and sexually assaulted her after she was dead. And then Mary Lou Hines, the way he butchered her, his ex-mother-in-law. And then he waited several hours for his ex-sister-in-law to come home, and he murdered her. You talk about a bloody crime scene. You talk about dismembered bodies. And to look at Tuesday Correll, his daughter, you know, it just, she had so many stab wounds on her. Those crime scene photos were very horrific. It showed the cruelty, and it showed how those 4 women suffered that night. That was the most horrible crime scene, and I've been to crime scenes before, but there have been stabbings, but nothing like this. And that was the one crime scene. It took me a pretty long while to put it back in the box and close it. You know, you would leave there at 6, 7 o'clock and go home, and you look at your notes to make sure, while it's still fresh in your mind, that you wrote it down correctly, because you use your quick version of shorthand. And there were nights that it took me a while to go to sleep. And then after that, you have to go back and revisit all those crime scene photos. So, you know, it's very important that you have to put it in the box and shut the box and move on.
Yeah. And I have to sit here and say not going to apologize to Thomas, but I confused him with Jerry Correll. And I was thinking I had those two flipped in my mind. So, but I'm not going to apologize to Thomas because it's not like he was a
Well, Thomas
innocent
was not.
person.
Thomas was not a saint. It was a really horrific homicide.
Yeah, but it wasn't the mass murder of
No.
several people.
No, he did this in an alleyway. And he left her there and came back and inserted, the not landscape, but the survey stake. No, he was the only person that showed any emotion when I sentenced him to die. He was actually frightened. You could see the terror when I read that death order to him.
But no remorse for what he did, just for what was going to happen to him.
I think my own personal opinion is, did he have any remorse? No. I think in his own little mind, in his own little world, he saw the horror that was going to follow him until the day that he died.
Yeah. Ugh. Well, I think I've got 3 more questions. Amy, the first one that I have is, what do you hope that readers take away from the book, especially when it comes to understanding the complexities of high-profile trials and the role of a judge?
I think there's a lot that readers can take away from the book in terms of your question. I would hope that readers would have more of an open mind about the death penalty in terms of how it can work for certain murderers and how evil really does exist out there. And, I think Judge Perry does a great job discussing the difference between life and the death penalty, the electric chair, the lethal injection. I think overall, just an education about the criminal justice system, the aggravating factors, the mitigating factors, just how it basically works. I had a better understanding after writing the book. I didn't know so much before that, but so I think that's one takeaway from it for sure. And also to understand the role judges have, especially capital murder judges that have to take on that responsibility of deciding whether someone should live or die because of their crimes. I just think that's fascinating to get it from a judge's perspective. It was very unique. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think this is a book that folks need to read because they need to see all the sides, and very rarely do you get to see the side of the judge. Do you and Judge Perry have any plans to collaborate again? Are there any projects that you're working on?
currently, I'm not writing anything right now. I'm a divorce attorney. So,
That's its
Busy.
own true crime story right there.
right, exactly. Of course, I love to write. I'll always write another book, but Judge Perry may have an idea, right, Judge?
We had briefly talked about, and I shared this before you got on the line, Amy, about the Black Road, the untold story. It has to be fiction based, but it's going to be based on some true stories, and it's to protect the guilty, so to speak. It reveals judges are real human beings and what they have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
People often ask, how did I end up with the worst of the worst cases? Some judges would come and tell me, could you take this case? Because they had difficulties with those type cases. There was a judge that had, he was on an assignment in a certain county, and all of the homicide cases had stacked up because he kept granting continuances because he didn't want to deal with them. And I ended up taking over 8 homicide cases in that county and disposing of all of them. And one of those cases was Scott Mansfield. And you will see that judges suffer from the same thing that a lot of other people suffer from. And while most judges are very conscientious, and we were very blessed to have during my time people who fulfill their oath, but they were imperfect human beings trying to be perfect, just like I'm not a perfect human being. But you have to learn to abide by your oath. A lot of decisions I made personally, I didn't agree with them, but I raised my right hand to support, defend, and protect the Constitution of the state of Florida and of the United States of America. If you're going to be true to your oath, you have to set aside your personal opinions and not have any philosophies. For 25 years on the bench, I learned to have no opinions. Your circle of friends become very narrow because you learn quite quickly that when you put on that black robe, people listen and interpret what you say very differently. And either chit chat can be your worst enemy. So your life is different. Your life is restrained because people will judge you about what you say and how you act. And one of the things you learn in a courtroom is that lawyers are just like children. They will get away with what you let them get away with. When I became a judge, I learned under judges who were quite strict and they followed the rules. And I always ran a no-nonsense courtroom. I treated everybody the same, but you didn't get a chance to slide on the black robe and take my place. It was clear in my courtroom that there was only one judge there. I listened to folks. I gave each side, time to say what they had to say, and that was it. I didn't permit going back and forth. I did not allow personal attacks. So, we'll probably look at this and talk about it. You're talking about 25 years and worth of things. So it can be sort of like one of those characters in Patterson's movie where you have different characters and you do a series.
You're going to be our next James Patterson?
I don't know about being the next James Patterson. All I can say is we may give it a stab. We'll see.
There you go.
It would be my honor. I love it.
Oh,
there you
and
go.
I will sign up to read whatever you put out because I am an avid reader. In fact, I'm 26 books behind on what my goal is for the year. So,
Well, I had a very small kind of sidestep question, really. Uh, I've been covering a lot of a case in Florida, and I wonder if you have any thoughts or if you can share any thoughts on Sarah Boone and what's been going on there. Have you been checking in with this?
Matter of fact, I've done some commentary for one of the local TV stations on the Sarah Boone case, and I did one this morning before jury selection.
we got to find those.
Okay. Fox 35.
Okay.
Sarah Boone is a very interesting lady. She's highly manipulative. She's gone through some of the best criminal defense attorneys. To finally, the judge basically told her that even though I've given you attorney after attorney, it has to stop. You have no good reason to discharge this attorney. So you're going to have to represent yourself. And then they found someone at the ninth hour to represent her. Sarah Boone wants to be the lawyer, but operate through the person who has the bar license. It's going to be a very interesting case because she's going to talk about she suffers from post-traumatic stress syndrome as a result of being an abused, quote, spouse, unquote. There are going to be some interesting testimony. How do you watch and play a game of hide and seek, zip somebody up in a suitcase, and let them suffocate to death? The question is, how will she behave in court when her lawyer does not take her advice and does not ask the questions that she wants asked? And she tries to insert herself, and then she tries to do something that can necessitate a mistrial so she can get a redo. Delay always works in the favor of the defendant. The longer it takes a case to go to trial, you have the following issues. Memories become foggy. And believe it or not, sometimes witnesses die. And they die unexpectedly. So you lose that particular testimony. So she has nothing to lose by delay. So
have you had have you had a chance to read any of the letters that she has sent and written?
I read a few. That is,
yeah.
It's the
what would you do if you were on the other end of those?
I've dealt with difficult clients who tried to fire lawyers and did fire lawyers. I've not to the extent that with Sarah Boone, but my attack was a little different. If you didn't have a good reason to discharge your lawyer under the law, I did not discharge your lawyer. I warn you of the consequences of representing yourself. I went through the colloquy of, I can't help you. You know nothing about procedure. You know nothing about the rules of evidence, etc. But I would always appoint a standby counsel because most of them got cold feet. I had a capital case. I can see his face now. The Disney murder, Huggins. He fired his lawyer during the penalty phase of his death case.
Wow.
And represented himself during the penalty phase. Of course, he got a recommendation of death, and I sentenced him to die. That was a very horrific murder. But Sarah Boone is a very unique individual who is crazy smart. She's very calculating, and she's been able to manipulate the system. And finally now, she's before the bar justice. The question is, will she be able to manipulate this and try to cause a mistrial when she does not see that things are going the way that she wants them to go?
Right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for commenting on that. I really appreciate it. And I think one of the important parts, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is, although you were part of some of the most talked about trials in Florida's history, and this is a loaded question, I realize that, especially for like one of the last ones. What do you hope is your legacy in the legal field, especially regarding the balance between justice and public expectation? Because now there is that with social media and broadcasting trials and things like that.
Well, with the Case Anthony case, they call that the social media trial of the century.
Mm-hmm.
My legacy, if there is a legacy, is what I tried to do was leave the system better than what I found it. If people can say that I was fair, that I was just, and that I showed mercy when appropriate, and that I treated people regardless of your station in life fairly, then I'm happy. No more, no less. I have always been the type of person I never sought fame. As I often tell people, I'm just a simple person who grew up in small town Orlando, that was blessed with incredible parents, blessed with a community that was very supportive, that helped mold me into the person that I am today, and that I did give something back to the community that was so good to me.
That's awesome. I
My,
think that's a perfect way to kind of cap it off, to be honest.
I'm like, that is perfect.
Bing. Well,
I mean,
I can say this. Well, go ahead, Teri.
I was gonna probably say what you're gonna say. I think we could have you on many, many more times and be just as fascinated and have so many questions.
If you look at the cases, we gave you what I call a smidgen of their impact.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that we could have done better at, but you have constraints as to page numbers, is the untold story of the impact of the survivors of those people who were murdered.
Mm-hmm. That could be a whole nother book.
And the impact on the men and women who investigated those cases.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard work that they did
Mm-hmm.
to put those cases together. And people always ask me, well, don't you think we should end the death penalty? And I say it's simple to end the death penalty. People need to stop murdering people in very heinous and cruel ways.
Mm-hmm.
And once someone dies, there's really no concern about the person who died. And people often forget that the death penalty is reserved for the worst of the worst, not for the ordinary homicides and the ordinary first-degree murders, but the worst of the worst, those individuals that go beyond the pale and just brutally take a life which causes someone untold suffering. You know, just imagine being stabbed to death. You're fighting, and each stab wound causes pain. And as you fight, you find that your life is leaving your body, and that impending doom. People tend to forget about that. And that's why the death penalty should be reserved for the worst of the worst. And that's why until we start treating each other better, you may see it for a while.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Teri, thank you so much to the two of you for coming on. Amy, thank you for sharing your talent in the form of this book. And I know you do a ton of other things too. But doggone it, if you do it half as well as you write. Wow. Just wow.
Thank you for picking up the phone and cold calling him and being tenacious and keep making those calls. I try to tell people, I'm like, what's it gonna hurt? All they're gonna do is say no. So I personally appreciate that you've done that because the book's amazing.
Oh, we've got you muted.
Sorry, I said that's exactly what I thought when I called him. And I said the worst that could happen is he doesn't answer or he says no. But he didn't. Thank you.
No, it's a great book.
Everybody
Thank you. Oh, sorry, JT.
Hold on. Are we talking? Okay, Angie had a question real quick. Thoughts on the change for the death penalty? It just needs to be a majority now versus unanimous. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Very rarely will you have a jury being unanimous in recommending the death penalty. And you can debate whether or not it's a simple majority or a super majority. But even in the Jerry Correll case, it was not a unanimous vote for death. I think I've had only 2 cases where there were unanimous votes for death. It is very hard for a layperson, particularly when someone who's against the death penalty is seated on the jury. The only thing they have to say is that they can impose it. But that's a big leap to ask the layperson to say that somebody needs to die. So I'm comfortable with not having it unanimous.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, everybody, you need to go to thevelvethammerbook.com.
Yes.
Or Amazon, whatever works best for you, and check out the book. Buy the book, because I promise you will have the same. I mean, the feedback that's been coming in all night has been fantastic. You will have this same thoughts, the same feedback, those same feelings reading the book. That's how true to Judge Perry and Amy's style of writing that you'll get that. So check the book out, please. Totally worth a read or 2 or 3.
Mhm.
I wanted to say we're working on an author website. The velvethammer.com
Oh.
may not work, but Amazon,
Oh.
Barnes and Noble, Goodreads,
Okay.
Thrift Books. It's all over the world
Oh,
online. But
thank you for saying that, because that is not
Yeah.
that does not take me to where it needs to be.
I'm a
and
At
Kindle
all.
girl,
But
so
definitely go to
it's on
Amazon.
Kindle as well. It's going to be on an audiobook soon.
Oh, nice.
And I think Arnell Powell is the narrator. And it just won a Literary Titan Award and has won several 5-star review badges and a couple of other awards. But
Yeah.
just wanted to say that.
Wow.
Well deserved. And there's
That's-
going to be more awards coming because it's a great book, and I read a lot, so I can feel comfortable saying that because I read a lot of books. So
All right. Well,
thank
thanks
you all
again
very
for
much.
you both joining.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. And
Yes.
yeah, of course. Anytime. Feel free.
Yeah.
We're more than happy to have you anytime. I think that's going to do it for us tonight, Teri. So, do you want to sign off? Do you want me to go first? What do you want to do?
Yeah, go ahead and sign off because we'll see everybody again on Thursday for our normal live stream.
Okay.
We will. I also have the transcripts on Wednesday night. That's where we read actual documents from court, get a good picture of what's going on. So a lot happening this week, but as I always end the show, take care of yourself, your friends, your family, and your community. And don't let anybody dull that sparkle. And shine on, you crazy diamonds, shine on.
And as we all know, I like to say, stay safe, watch out for crime, and always enjoy your wine time, guys. And I will see you on Wednesday with Midday Missing, where we cover our next missing person cases.
Thank you.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks
guys.
again.
Bye-bye.